Hey folks, David Stewart here. Time for some more Storycraft. This is regarding plot structure, specifically what I call the 5-act plot structure. If you have been following along with my write streams, which happen every Wednesday at 6 p.m., right now I am doing a free how to write a book and publish it in 6 weeks kind of course. And so this last week I talked about planning your book, and part of that was planning the plot. The only structure I went over was the 3-act structure, what I call a 3-act structure. It's actually pretty loose, and same thing with the 5-act structure as well. I didn't get around to talking to any other plot structures. So for this video, I'd like to talk about a 5-act plot structure and how you can use it in your story to pace and structure the events to tell hopefully a satisfying story. You don't have to try to force any story into any particular structure of plot events. It's more like, what kind of story are you trying to tell, and does that structure support and help you to organize your events so that your book is efficient and is effective for readers. The 5-act structure is a little bit different from the 3-act structure. When we're looking at 3 acts, I tend to focus on exposition, chaos, and then finally the 3rd act, which is where everything is finally resolved, the highest level of tension. With a 5-act structure, we have a little bit more division there. So the 3-act, I look at 3 acts with some transitions. In the 5 acts, you're looking at entire acts that would be the equivalent of a transition period in a 3-act structure. So the first act in a 5-act structure is exposition, and it focuses pretty much exclusively on exposing everything that the reader needs to know, showing off the main characters, having them talk to one another and display their traits, introducing the protagonists, any antagonists, as well as introducing the main themes and conflicts that you're going to be exploring in the book. The 2nd act is the first big event, and that big event causes the trajectory of the story to change and take on new meaning and new direction. The 3rd act is chaos, meaning it's loose, we don't know what's going on, characters are reacting to this profound event that happened in the 2nd act and starting to organize themselves for the final 2 acts. The 4th act is the preparation for the 5th act. It's where all of the characters are organizing themselves and figuring out how to resolve the conflict. And the 5th act is focused entirely on resolution of the conflict in total. This 5-act structure is probably most popularly recognized from Shakespeare. Shakespeare, of course, would formally divide his plays into 5 actual acts with breaks in between them. You don't have to do that when you're writing a story or when you're writing a novel. It's more just how you're going to structure the entire thing and at what points in the manuscript you're going to try to create those key events and where in the manuscript you're going to be focusing on what. So with the 5-act structure, the first act, if you will, the first fifth of the book is really just focused on exposition. If you look at something like the tragedy of Julius Caesar, that's what you get. You get all the characters talking about Caesar, about how he wants to be king, talking about how that's a big problem, and you have each character kind of take sides and talk with one another about their thoughts about Julius Caesar, who was a dictator for life, becoming king. The 2nd act focuses on the murder of Julius Caesar. That's the big event that changes the trajectory of the story. It sets most of the things in motion, and the entire act is really focused around bringing you up to that moment. The 3rd act is chaos. It's everybody reacting to that event and figuring out what to do. It's where you have all of the characters organizing themselves into separate camps, fleeing Rome, doing all those sorts of things in order to react to this big event of Julius Caesar being killed. The 4th act, you have all of the characters at this point engaged in a civil war and preparing for the final battle. And the 5th act is the final battle and the reactions to that final battle. So if you want to think of the format, it's exposition, action, reaction, preparation, action, reaction. The final action and reaction tend to happen all in the 5th act. So when you get to the 5th act, the final battle happens, there's consequences, then the last part of the story is the reaction to those. If we look at Julius Caesar, it's, you have Cassius and Brutus lose their respective battles, and first Cassius dies and then Brutus dies, and then you have Mark Antony reacting to the death of Brutus and declaring him a noble Roman who was just trying to do what was right for Rome, even though he did something that was wrong. So that is really how the 5-act structure works. In terms of tension, what you get is low amounts of tension in the opening act, and then a big ratcheting up in the second act, along with a little bit of relief in the third act, and slow ascent of tension up to the fifth act, where everything is at its tensest, where you don't know what the outcomes are going to be like, and then everything snaps. You have the resolution of the conflict, and then you have the characters that react to that. That's a typical way that a 5-act structure would work. I've actually used 5-act structures before. So in Muramasa Blood Drinker, this book right here, which you can get on Amazon, it's a Sengoku period Japanese historical fantasy kind of book. There's 5 distinct acts, and there's a formal division between those. So the first act is really just an exposition of the main characters, Taoka, Yoshio, and Amaya, and they are involved with the noble, but it's really just about them exploring their characters, as well as showing the main antagonist and what Yoshio is trying to do when he's pursuing that main antagonist. The second act, we have an introduction to Muramasa himself. By the time you get to the third act, it's preparation for these last couple of acts, and the fourth and fifth act are really centered around a bunch of events that happened in Osaka that profoundly change the characters' relationships with each other, as well as ratchet up the tension for the final confrontation between the antagonist and the protagonist. There's different ways to interpret that 5-act structure, but that's the way I interpreted it for this one. It's about exposition, action, reaction, and then you have building up, you have preparation, then you have action and reaction again. So it's kind of like it's almost symmetrical, even though it's designed in 5 acts, because you do have an exposition, which is the setting up, action, reaction, and then you have another setup, although it's not the same as the exposition. It's a setup for the final parts of the story. Then you have another action and reaction. So hopefully that's informative and interesting for you guys. Let me know what you think down below in the comment section. I'm always interested to hear your take on it. What have you seen that has that 5-act structure in it? And did you like the way that things were paced when they were divided up into this kind of symmetrical version of storytelling? So thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time.